Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at the Uniden R7 and specifically take a look at how it compares to the Uniden R3. A lot of you guys who already have an R3 are wondering, should you go ahead and switch to the R7, or maybe if you're looking for the first time, should you just go straight for the R3 and save $200? This is $399, or should you spend the extra cash and go for the R7, which is $599? And so in this video, I pretty much want to do a more direct comparison between the two detectors. Now, the R7 is scheduled to be released next month. I've been running a beta version of the detector for about the past week or so, and so I'm getting a good idea of how the two detectors compare. Not everything is going to be exactly right, but it's giving me a good idea, and I want to go ahead and share with you guys kind of my initial thoughts of Uniden R3 versus Uniden R7. So first things first, the biggest difference between the two detectors, of course, is that the R7 adds a rear antenna to give you arrows. With this detector, it's able to point to the location of the source, whether the officer is up ahead of you, off to the side, or back behind. This is really useful information in practice to know where the officer is, maybe especially at night, if you can't see him or you just pull onto the highway and you're not sure is he ahead of you or behind. It lets you know, when you pass the officer, or maybe you've passed him but there's another threat up ahead. Like having the arrows, it's very useful additional information. Now there's a whole debate that's been going on for years and years, even with the Valentine one. Why do you need arrows? If it beeps, slow down. There's the endless debate that you can get into. Yes, it provides a lot of additional situational awareness. I find it really useful. Not everybody needs it. And so it's something that you kind of have to just make the judgment call on. I find it really helpful to know, when to slow down, when you could speed back up, and just giving me a better idea of what's going on around me in general and increase situational awareness, which is really the biggest benefit of the arrows. Uniden's also doing some cool things with the arrows where you can even go in and customize the color of the arrows depending on what you want. For example, maybe you want it to be like a V1, and so you'd want all of your arrows to always be red. You can also customize the color of the arrows and say maybe K-band could be yellow and KA-band could be blue. That way you can tell just from the colors what's going on, and it gives you a better indication of what's going on around you. Plus, you also get the direction information for up to 3 additional signals as well, which before this you needed something like a V1 and YaV1 or JBV1, basically a third-party app running on your phone to give you directional information for the other signals as well. So there's some cool stuff here around the arrows, but the big news is, well, the fact that it actually has arrows in the first place compared to the R3. Now, the next big change is going to be a change with GPS lockouts. The R3, as you guys know, has manual GPS lockouts. So when you come across a stationary false alert, you just double press the mute button and it learns this false alert and filters it out for you in the future. So the next time you come by the same grocery store with an automatic door opener or a speed sign or something, the detector will memorize that and filter it out for you. Now, the R7 also has manual GPS lockouts. However, once the patent expires on automatic GPS lockouts, Uniden's going to be able to release a software update to add auto lockouts to the R7, something that's not going to be able to come to the R3 due to not having enough memory built into the R3. Auto lockouts are going to be something exclusive to the R7. And the benefit there is as you drive around, the detector will automatically figure out what's a false alert, what's a legitimate alert, all that kind of stuff. And if it keeps seeing the same signal over and over, it will start learning those signals for you and filtering them out automatically, which is something I find really, really useful, especially when you get a new detector with a bunch of false alerts. You just drive around and it figures everything out for you. Now, personally, even though I can go in and kind of for the most part tell is it, a grocery store or is it a BSM or something, sometimes I do get it wrong and I have to go in and unlock the signal. There's also little things I'm finding where sometimes the lockout radius that I create manually is a little bit too small, meaning the lockout is here, but the signal actually goes out to here. So what can happen is I'll drive up to a stationary false alert, the detector will alert initially, and then the GPS lockout kicks in after that. So even though I have the signal locked out, I'm still getting an alert initially. Now, auto lockouts would be nice because it can keep track of all that kind of stuff for me and take care of it hands-free. And so even though it's not too big of a deal to create the lockouts yourself, I still find it really useful to have the detector doing that for you. Now, speaking of kind of muting signals in general, I really like actually with the R7, the mute button is right here on the front of the detector. With the R7, they moved it. I think it's kind of weird because you do have this extra room here on the chin where they could put a mute button, but on this detector, it's actually over here on the side of the detector, which I think is the first time I've seen this out of any windshield mount detector. The way that it works in practice is when you're driving, you just kind of grab your hand like this and press the mute button on the side to lock out, double press. And so yes, you do have the button right there. It's a little bit weird of a placement. In practice, I'm finding you get used to it pretty quick and it's not that big of a deal, but I really do wish that they just put the mute button right there on the front of the detector. Now, another hardware change that they made that I like is that they changed the power cable port over here to the right side of the detector. It's a minor thing and most people won't really care, but I find in general I like it when the power cable, it's on the passenger side of the detector, and so when I look up at the detector as the driver, I don't see the power cable. Plus, if I need to flip down my sun visor, depending on the orientation of the car and whatnot, there's less of a chance of the sun visor actually getting blocked by the power cable. So little thing, probably not too big of a deal for most people, but that is something that I do like. Now, speaking of the power connector, a lot of people have asked about compatibility with previous versions of power connectors, whether it's a cigarette lighter cable or a hardwire cable. If you already have a power cable that you're using for your R1 and your R3, you're going to be able to take it out and plug it into your R7 and it will be compatible just fine. So whether it's power or your mute buttons or remote alert LEDs, all that kind of stuff will work perfectly with the R7 if you're upgrading from the R1 or the R3. Something else that I like is, like the DFR8 and DFR9, Uniden has added an ambient light sensor to the R7, which means the display brightness can automatically adjust daytime and nighttime, bright and dim, depending on, well, the ambient light levels. And so when it gets dark at night, the display can automatically dim for you. They added that feature to the R3 kind of using GPS stuff, where basically you would set at what time, based on GPS, it can tell what time it is, what time it switches, bright or dim, daytime or night. And that works okay, but, if you live at higher latitudes, like I do, sunrise and sunset times change throughout the year, so you keep having to go in there and change it, and it doesn't always have the settings that you need, especially when the times start to get really extreme. And so I like the fact that they've included an ambient light sensor built into the detector now, so it can figure all that out for you without you having to go in and mess with any settings in the detector. You do have the ability, though, to go into the settings and adjust how bright or how dim the display gets once the detector automatically changes the brightness levels. As far as BSM filtering, Uniden didn't make any changes or improvements to the BSM filtering, and so all of the cars that cause the R3 to false also cause the R7 to false. It's things like Hondas and Acuras, which I've got a ton of them around here, so they get really annoying. If I've got other people in the car, sometimes I actually keep my finger right on the remote mute button, and so if I see maybe an Acura coming up behind me or something, I'm just ready to mute it as soon as the alert pops up. It also does false to some Mazdas that I'm finding, though some GMC vehicles I'm seeing that I can pass by those and the R3 is able to filter them out. Or R7 rather. I have to get used to saying R7, not R3. Now, that said, the BSM filtering I do think is probably one of the biggest weaknesses. I've been coming from running the Max 360C or the Max CI 360, Escort's windshield mounts with arrows or their remote version, and this does have better BSM filtering than the R3 or the R7. It's not perfect, it still does false itself too, but this one is going to be a little bit quieter than the Uniden one, and I really, really wish that Uniden would improve upon that. That's probably the biggest difference that I noticed coming from having run the Escort ones for a little while. And it's one of the reasons that I really don't think there's any one detector, including the R7, that's going to be universally the best for everybody. Every detector has pros and cons, and I'll get more and more into that. Max 360C versus R7 versus V1 versus Redenso, all that kind of stuff. I'll cover that in another video, especially as we get closer to the release. But yeah, BSM filtering is the same in terms of capability with the R7 compared to the R3. They're also adding voice alerts for the arrow, so when the detector goes off front or rear, it can actually speak that.
Front, MRCD. Rear, MRCD.
And finally, there are things like the wider K-band scanning range. So for those of you guys who encounter lower frequency K-band usage, the detector actually scans down lower, down to about 23.950 or so. And a big thanks to Dukes for actually testing and verifying this for us. So as you can see, there's a number of changes that the R7 is bringing over the R3. The two biggest ones, of course, are the arrows and the introduction of automatic GPS lockouts once they're able to add that in with the software update. And so if those features are important to you, or maybe some of the other things like the ambient light sensor and whatnot, yeah, the R7 is going to be shipping next month and it is going to retail for $599, so $200 more than the R3. If you don't necessarily need those features, if you're in the, well, if it beeps, I'll just slow down camp, then maybe save the $200 and get the R3 instead. And so again, pros and cons up to you and what you feel is the best way to spend your money. As always, there's never one size fits all that's universally applicable for everyone. As much as I wish there was, because that would make my job so much easier. It would make things so much simpler for you guys, but still, even with the R7, great detector. It's got its pros and cons, and it's going to be a great choice for a lot of people, but even it is not for anybody. So let me know, what are your thoughts? Do you think the extra money is well worth it for the R7? Do you plan on getting one? Do you already have one on pre-order? I know a lot of you guys do, while a lot of you guys are waiting for more videos and testing and everything. So kind of let me know your thoughts on R7 versus getting another detector like the R3, or maybe even another branded detector. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Anyways, that's kind of my initial thoughts so far on like the biggest differences between R3 and R7. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.